Well, it's good to be back tonight. We are going to start a study in theology, which is the study of God. And for my class tonight, I have a picture, Michelangelo's Hand of God picture. And I think that when Michelangelo painted the picture, it's a picture where you see God and he's pointing his finger, and he has created Adam. I think he based it off that scripture where it said God made man in his own image. Well, that actually is a term called anthropomorphism, and we'll get more into it. That's describing God in human terms. But this picture is not anthropomorphic. This is a painting that Michelangelo painted as his view of what God looks like. And God being spirit, how could he paint what God looks like? That's a good question. How could he paint something? There's no way to paint it. There's no way to, it's kind of like trying to paint a picture of air. You can't paint something you cannot see. And we're going to begin our study so you understand more about this. This is just the beginning. These pages that I've gotten are just the beginning of a great journey. So this is actually theology, and what theology is a study of God. Once you know more about um, the study of God, you begin to understand more about worship. And we're going to begin our study with Exodus chapter 3, verse number 1 through 14. Brother Jamie, the monitor's not up on the top, so I didn't know if you knew that or not, but we're going to begin with this passage because it deals with Moses as he has been raised in Egypt around many different gods, many different idols, and those gods and idols that he grew up around, they had images to what those gods look like. Are you following? Are you following what I'm saying? That's what he was raised up to view. God's going to straighten him out, and I think it's important for us to understand what does the Bible teach about him? What is it that the Bible tells us about God? And I said this, the important thing about any type of learning, especially with the Bible, is unlearn what you've learned so you can learn. Because we can have our own ideas about what we think God looks like, and it's going to be completely, it's not going to even register with what the Bible states. So we're going to, I think the monitor is up in the back. Is it back in the back? Okay. Well, I've got it here, so we'll just follow. I'll just follow on here because it's just chapter 3, verse number 1 through 4. So I'd encourage you to follow along. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Now, let me say this before I go any further. If he was in Egypt, how could he be doing this? Because he had killed an Egyptian, and now he has escaped to the land of Midian. He's not in Egypt now. He has escaped from Egypt. He ends up in Midian. He is keeping a flock for his father-in-law, Jethro. So that tells me he married when he was out of Egypt. But anyway, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is going to be the same place where he's going to bring the mountain of God. This is going to be the same place where he'll lead the children of Israel. Are you follow me? This is marvelous. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Now, keep in mind, Moses never saw God, but he heard this voice out of a burning bush that was not burning. Are you following me? This is something. But anyway, and there's a lot of theology in this, and for time's sake, and I may come back to that, but and he said, draw nigh, not nigh thither or hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Now I'm gonna give you a clue here. He still couldn't see God, but he was afraid to look upon God. Now we're going to get to that in just a little bit. How could he be able to look upon God when God is a spirit? Now we're going to look more into this as we go along. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come upon me, and I have seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee. And this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. And when thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall surely serve God upon this mountain. Now again, let me tell you, this mountain was in Midian, and I hope to get a map to show you where this was. It's not where people have always put that. If you've got a map in your Bible, Katie, you're gonna see something. And since this is class, I'm going to. So any of you that are looking, you're going to see, if you see the map of where Moses supposed to have brought them, it would be where you would see, this is a supposed place. Do you see where it says Sinai? There is the Red Sea, and it's split in two. You see it, Katie? You've got the Red Sea, and then it kind of splits. A lot of the maps will have like, let me see if I can show you. Okay, come on, let's take this right here, fold it. It's right here. They say that it would be right down in here, but where the land of Midian would be on this side. Okay, so I'll get a better map for you, and as we go along. But anyway, give you kind of an estimate of where we're talking about. So anyway, he's back there. God's telling him, I'm going to bring this people back here. Now notice in verse number 13, and Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come to the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say unto me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto him, or unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent you. That's basically when we see that term, I am that I am. There are actually the words have been variously understood this way. In the Vulgate, it translates, I am who am. The Septuagint, it described, that name actually is described as, I am he who exists. The Syriac, the Persic, and the Chaldee preserved the original words without any gloss over them. And the Arabic phrases them, the eternal, who passes not away. So what it really tells me is, God really doesn't have a name. I am that I am. As the original words literally signify, I will be what I will be. Now you will find words, and I will eventually get them, like Jehovah Jireh, and those are descriptive words. But it's not his name. It is descriptive words. And we'll get into the area of when you see the angel of the Lord descriptive of Jesus Christ. Now, some have supposed that God simply designed to inform Moses that what he had been to his father Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, he would be to him and the Israelites, and that he would perform the promises he had made to his fathers by giving their descendants the promised land. Basically, what God was to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's going to be that to him. Now, mind you, I want to remind you that Moses had been taught under the house of Pharaoh these different idols. And each one there was like Isis, and in fact, there was the frog god, and I've got all these different ones here. But as far as God himself, he has no name. I am that I am. And again, when we get into these other the names, that's just a name like Jehovah Jireh. That's just a name that's going to describe him in this particular setting. I will be with you. I forever will be, whatever. But that is not his name. It's difficult to put a meaning on the words. They seem they seem intended to point out the eternity and self-existence of God. Self-existence. So what that tells me is this: God didn't come from anything. He always has been. And by the way, he did not create man because he was lonesome. He always has been. He always will be. This is the God that I'm trying to teach us when we worship. That it's hard to put God in a human mentality. You can't do that. You can't capsulize him. In the study of God's attributes, it's important not to exalt one attribute over another. When that's done, it presents a caricature of God. In other words, you can't just describe him this way, and then later on describe him this way, and later like God is love, God is peace, God is a God of anger, God would. But you have to combine all of them. You understand what I'm trying to say? When all attributes of God are taken together, it provides an understanding of the nature and person of God. I like that, the nature and person of God, because God is a person. Now let's look at the attributes of God. John chapter 4, verse number 24. We deal with his spirituality. John writes, in fact, this was a statement that Jesus made, God is a spirit. When I use this term, God is a spirit, you can't put an image to it. A spirit has nothing that you can't put an image on a spirit. Are you following me? And they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So God is a spirit. He's not a spirit. He is spirit. And who does not, and by the way, he does not have physical form. Now, wait a minute. Where does Jesus come in? I'll deal with that in just a little bit. A body localizes, but God is spirit. Guess what? He's everywhere, and he cannot be limited. You understand what I'm saying? A spirit is localized. I mean, a body is localized. God does not have a body, so he is not limited. He's not limited to time or place. In fact, David said, if I go to the deepest hell, thou art there. If I am in the top or in the deepest of the water, thou art there. There's not a place where God is not. So guess what that means? Wherever you are, God is always watching. There's not a place where he is not. And yet, what's so magnificent about it, his immensity is so vast that he holds the earth in the palm of his hand. Now that's anthropomorphism. Now I'll get to that in just a minute. Because God does not have a hand. You thought about that? He holds the earth in his hand, but God does not have a hand. But that's anthropomorphic. It is describing God in a human, in human understanding. Spirituality goes further than just simply identifying God as not having a body. It also means he's the source of all life. He is not the creator of evolution or theistic evolution. He didn't start with mixing up these amoebas and then let them go. He did not do that. What God did, God did. Now, I will agree with one half of that, this painting, and that's the part of Adam. I will agree with that, that he made Adam a full-grown human being. And then he's brought he's made Eve as a full-grown human so that they can multiply without any flaws. They had no flaws. And this is something else. Did they have a belly button? They did? No, they wouldn't have a belly button because guess what? They weren't born. They were. This is something. I mean, and always when in the view of a belly button is always reminding us of one thing, that we came from our parents, and those parents, and those parents, and eventually you will finally come to your first parents, which had no belly button. Now that's something else. Exodus 20, verse number 1 through 4. And God spake all these words, saying, this is to the children of Israel, I am the Lord thy God, which has brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above, or that's in the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity on the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generations of them that hate me. Basically, I'm the Lord thy God. Don't make me look like something in the sea, or what you think, or don't make me look human. That's bringing me down to the human level. So God does not have a physical form, and it's wrong to make any likeness, I put likeness, but likeness of him to what we think he looks like. It's wrong to do that. You can't can't put an image on something that you cannot see or you cannot even comprehend. We come to something called anthropomorphism. You ever heard that term? Jamie has. Stephanie said she had. You ever heard of that, Bella? Anthropomorphism? Okay. You've heard it? Yeah, they're going, yeah. Well, you're fortunate because I never heard of it until I went to theology. Anthropomorphism is this. It's a figurative language giving God human characteristics that can be used to make him understandable. You see what, you understand what that is? That's, in other words, giving him human characteristics. And I'll give you some examples. It's not saying he has those things, but it's giving him a characteristics where we can kind of understand him in human terms. In Exodus 31:18, notice this. Now, God does not have hands. He does not have a body. Well, what about Jesus Christ? We're going to get there. So don't let that, but God himself. By the way, when I get to the part with Jesus Christ, remember when there was someone that looked at Christ and said, good master, and he said, don't call me good. There wasn't anything good about the flesh part. They were seeing him on the flesh aspect. They were not seeing him as God. Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. Look at Exodus 31. And he gave unto Moses, and when he had made the end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the what? God doesn't have fingers. But it's a descriptive. It's describing him in human. But he doesn't have fingers. His might, it was kind of like, I'll put it this way right here. That would be like if I had enough power, I could scratch my name in glass or steel or stone. That's the super. But you think about this. If God, to describe it, that God's finger carved out the 10 commandments, that's saying, man, he is powerful. But how would they understand it? It's like this. But he doesn't have fingers, but. Yeah, make them understand. Look at the next thing. God doesn't have body parts. Understand that. Psalm 89:10, thou hast broken Rahab in pieces as one that is slain. Thou hast scattered thine enemy with thy strong arm. God doesn't have arms. But it's a characteristic that, you put it in human characteristics. Don't let it confuse you, but it's just, he's just describing the best way that he can. Here's another one. He stretched out his hand over the sea. This is in Isaiah. And he shook the kingdoms. The Lord hath a commandment against the merchant city to destroy the strongholds thereof. Leviticus chapter 20, verse number 6. And the soul that turneth after such and hath familiar spirits and after wizards go a-whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and I will cut him off from among the people. God doesn't have a face. But it's an anthropomorphic description. It'd be kind of hard to get that message over if well, I'm gonna set my invisible face, I'm gonna set my invisible spirit, whatever. So he's just making it so they can get kind of a human description. In Exodus 33, and here's what we were talking about. God doesn't have a body parts, but look at this. And he said, thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there's a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock, and it shall come to pass that while my glory passeth by, that I will put thee in a cliff of the rock, will cover thee with my hand while I pass by, and I will take away my hand, that thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. That's anthropomorphism. It's describing God with human characteristics. Do you get that, Kate, or is it kind of, it's like trying to understand the Trinity. Psalm 102:25. Of old how hast thou laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thy hands. Now it's interesting. Guess when God made himself flesh with hands and flesh and bone? When did that happen? When was it that God became flesh? Okay, well, he didn't have a body. This is anthropomorphism. Now, this is interesting. Anthropomorphic expressions are to be understood only in the sense of being human terms used in order to bring infinite within the comprehension of the finite, to enable man to know God. Does that make sense? That's why he described those. It is just to help us to comprehend the infinite. No man ever saw God as he is in his invisible essence, and so it's perfectly true to say no man has seen God at any time. Now, I'm going to put it this way right here. When they saw Christ, they didn't see the infinite God. They saw the visible manifestation of an invisible God. Let's look at this, John chapter 1. This is a Christophany. I know that sounds kind of strange, but this is a Christophany. This is God became man in Christ. God becomes flesh. We're not talking about three gods. Now, we can get really, we can get very, how shall I say, what's the word for it? We could get very technical. I don't want to make this understandable. In John chapter 1, verse number 18, no man has seen God at any time. Okay. That's the fact. No man has seen God at any time. The only way that man has been able to get an idea is when the only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he declared him. You follow me? Katie, you look at it like, okay. Let's go back again. No man has seen God at any time. Why? Because God is what? Spirit. Okay, you can't see a spirit. Okay, because he's spirit, you can't see a spirit. The Trinity is what? The Spirit. The Trinity is what? Spirit. The Father is, come on, Steph, the Father is what? Spirit. Jesus Christ, before he became flesh, is what? He's spirit. These three are one God, okay? Now, how is man going to be able to have a comprehension of the infinite? This will answer it. God had to become flesh. God gloved himself in human flesh. In the beginning was the Word. You've heard me use this. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Who do we know the Word is? Jesus Christ. So in the beginning, was Jesus fleshed? No. He's spirit. fact, he didn't even, put it this way, he didn't have a name. Guess when he got his name? And thou shalt call his name, meaning God with us. Remember when God told Moses, I am that I am? Okay. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him. Without him was not anything that was made. In him was life, and life was the light of men. And the light shineth into darkness, and darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was a true light, which lighteth every man that come to the world. He was in the world. Now, by the way, that's reference to Jesus Christ, was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. Because guess how they were, to them at that time, nothing divine could have been flesh. Nothing divine could have come from the heavenlies. You see, do you understand where we're going with this now? Now, look at this name here. But as many as received him, or he came to his own received not. But as many as received him, to him gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were not born of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Now, look at this right here. Look at verse number 14. And the Word was what? Made flesh. And dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory. Because now they could see this flesh that would actually help them to comprehend the infinite. If Jesus did not become flesh, how would they be able to comprehend the infinite? How could they do that? If they could not see Christ in the flesh, how could they comprehend the infinite? They couldn't. He would still be in the heavenlies, and we beheld his glory. The glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Now here's what's interesting. Jesus Christ as God, the infinite God, the eternal God, the immense God, became the visible manifestation of the invisible God. God became flesh. He gloved himself in a human form. Now let's before we go any further, if the ones who he grew up around could see that he was the infinite God that had clothed himself in human flesh, would they have treated him like they did? You understand where I'm going with this? So for him what was his purpose of coming for the first place? What was the purpose of Jesus Christ coming? To seek and to save that which is lost. He didn't come to perform miracles. That was not the reason he came. But why did he perform miracles? Jamie, you taught on that. Why did Jesus perform miracles? Exactly. There was no problem with the infinite God creating the world. They understood the I am. Are you following me? They had no problem with that. To confirm that he was divine. That's why he did the miracles. That's why, by the way, the infinite God, the I am, the great I am, was he not the one who created earth? Was he not the one who created the seas? Was he not the one who created all things? So it should never bring us to wonder how he was able to say, "Peace, be still," when the waves were busting over, because he created those. It was to confirm who he was. Remember when the disciples were out in the ship and the ship was being tossed to and fro. Remember that? And Jesus made that statement about, "Don't be afraid, it is I." Remember what Peter said? "Well, if it's you, call me to come out." And he says, "Okay, Peter, come on out." And he was fine. He was fine until he took his eyes off of Jesus Christ. Now, when Jesus Christ made that statement, when they said, "Good master," and he said, "Don't call me good." The only one that's good is, think of it in the divine realm. The only one that's good is Father in heaven. Don't focus on the flesh part, but it took the flesh of Jesus Christ, it took the flesh of God to die for our sin. Now, look at this. Jesus Christ as God became the visible manifestation of the invisible God. God became flesh. Remember in Luke chapter 2, verse number 7? "And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, laid him in a manger because there was no room for them." Guess who was Mary's firstborn son? I want you to think about it. Who was Mary's firstborn son? You better get deeper than that.
Well, can I read it from the paper?
I know.
The visible manifestation of the invisible God.
And really, if you really want to get it really down here, it's really going to blow your mind. Her firstborn son was the infinite God that just clothed himself in human flesh. And what's interesting is this. We have those little nativity scenes, and people don't think twice that when you think of the nativity, when you think of that birth, that was the infinite God that created the womb whereby he would come in to become flesh. That blows me away. So Mary's firstborn son was the visible manifestation of the invisible God. God was made flesh. He humbled himself as a servant. Now, it's interesting is this. As God, did Jesus have dirty diapers? Yes. Was Jesus the typical 2-year-old? Yes. Are you following me? No, he never did. He never did. He never talked back to his mom. To talk back to his mom meant that he had the sin nature. He didn't have the sin nature, but he was a 2-year-old. Now it goes back to where they said, "Well, where's your son? He's doing the Father's business." Well, I know. Well, Joseph, where's your son? He's doing his Father's business. By the way, He was in he was he was in God's house, and they didn't recognize that the God of the house was there. Was he any? Oh man, you got that right, brother. You got it right. Why should God stick around when people don't want him? You get what I'm saying? When you grasp this, I know as we go on, it'll be a little bit less confusing as we go along. But what we're talking about when we come to worship, we're worshiping this God I'm talking about. So you can't approach him. You cannot approach him just like you would, like Michelangelo did this. When he painted that picture, I had no problem with the way he painted Adam. I had no problem with that. But God didn't have a beard. How's he going to paint God like this when there's no way to paint him? It would have been just as easy if he'd left that out and just left Adam in there like he's reaching up, So when we think of God, don't think of him in human terms, because if you think of him in human terms, then you start bringing God down to a human level, and we are much lower than this infinite God. We're only here because we are here because God allows us to be here. I'm convinced, and I wish, and this is something, young people think they've got their whole life ahead of them, but their life is only determined how long God wants them to be. God can turn it off real quick. I had a boy I had to do a funeral for. I believe it was your age, Bella. He got in trouble with his parents. They had to send him to it was a place for troubled kids. Well, it wasn't military, but this was in Oxford, and he went swimming, and it wasn't deep, but his feet got caught in some roots and stuff, and he drowned. He's about your age. And sometimes I tell you what God will do. God will let young people live a miserable life. I'm been around as long as I have simply because God has allowed me to be here. But I have no guarantees for tomorrow. None of us do. God is the one. He's the one who allows us to exist. For in him we move and we breathe and we have our being. We have our being. God is so good. God is so good.
You've been listening to the live broadcast of the Sunday evening Bible study of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church in Smyrna, Tennessee. We invite you to tune in at the same time next Sunday evening for another live broadcast of the Sunday evening Bible study. We would love to see your comments regarding this broadcast. You may email us at imbr@imbmpodcasts.com. That's imbr@imbmpodcasts.com. Or you may write to us at International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee 37167. That's International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee 37167. Thank you for listening, and may you have a blessed day.